Did you know that more than 230 years ago, an African-American man, Dr. James Durham, opened a medical practice in New Orleans? Did you know that way back in 1837, Dr. James McCune Smith, also an African-American, graduated from the University of Glasgow, Scotland Medical School? How about this? The first African-American surgeon to serve in the U.S. Army, Dr. Alexander Thomas Augusta, was born right here in Hampton Roads, Virginia. To learn that and more, you should stay tuned for Health Watch. Hello, I'm Terrence Affer Anderson, and this is Health Watch. In observance of Black History Month, I thought I'd introduce you to an obscure but remarkable bit of medical history that will surely get your attention. Our topic today is a history of African Americans in medicine. This incredible heritage is simply choice. Let me share just a tad bit more of a background on the men I just mentioned. Dr. Durham operated his New Orleans medical practice from 1783 to 1801. He had been a slave owned by white doctors who taught him medicine and who allowed him to work with their patients. Later, he bought his freedom and opened his practice. Yet the city of New Orleans shut it down because he was not licensed. Dr. Alexander Thomas Augusta was not the only first African American to earn the rank of surgeon in the U.S. Army. And note that this was during the Civil War, the height of the Civil War in 1863. But he was also the first person of African ancestry to graduate from Ontario University's Trinity College. He attended medical school in Canada because no U.S. school would allow his admission. At the end of the Civil War, he was promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel, and later he became the first and only African American on the original faculty of the Howard Medical College, now the Howard University School of Medicine. Like Dr. Augusta, Dr. James McCune Smith, who was a native New Yorker, was not able to find a U.S. medical school that would admit him. So he traveled to Scotland and attended the University of Glasgow Medical School. He later returned to New York and opened the first African-American pharmacy on West Broadway. No doubt, these were pretty amazing men, and today on Health Watch, we're going to tell you about many more and some rather spectacular women as well. But let me get started with my guests, a couple of women who are themselves quite extraordinary. I found a brief bio on my first guest on none other than the U.S. News and World Report Health website. Her name is Angela Mercer, M.D. Dr. Mercer received her medical degree from the Virginia Commonwealth University School of Medicine and has been in practice for more than 38 years. She is a medical director of the Norfolk Community Health Center. A professor of history at Norfolk State University who specializes in African American and Virginia history. My next guest is Dr. Cassandra Newby Alexander. Dr. Newby Alexander graduated with a BA degree in American Government and African American Studies from the University of Virginia in 1980. In 1983, she attended an international graduate summer program at Oxford University in the United Kingdom. In 1984, she completed her coursework for her MA degree at Old Dominion University, and in 1992 she earned a PhD in history from the College of William and Mary. Ladies, welcome to Health Watch. Drs. Mercer and Newby Alexander. I'm so very pleased to have you guys on the show to talk about this exciting topic because I know you both so very well. And what I would like to do is to begin by having our viewers become a bit more familiar with who you are, who each of you are. And let's begin with yourself. And I'm going to tell you right up front that I'm going to refer to my notes because I have a lot of information in my notes that I want to make sure that I cover. Now, you and I have quite a history, Dr. Mercer. We go all the way back to the great I.C. Norcom High School of old, right? Yeah, hey, Maroon, and great. We do love you today. Hey, Maroon. And you were also my primary care physician. But tell us a little bit more about yourself. When did you realize that you wanted to go to medical school, and what was it like being an African-American woman enrolled in medical school at that time?
My earliest memory of me wanting to become a doctor was 4, and I don't know if I remember. 4 years old.
You used to play doctor with your...
Yes, and I had a patient that came in the other day that was a friend of ours when we were children, and she reminded me of how I would pretend as if I was a doctor at that time. So as the years went by, I was thinking, now my father went to Lincoln University in the 1920s, and then he went to Howard Medical School for 2 years before the Depression came, and he was not able to finish Howard University or finish medical school at all. And so I'm thinking that he must have programmed me during those early childhood years. So I really remember wanting to become a doctor from whenever I can remember.
So you have a patient now that was likely one of your patients when you were 4 years old.
Well, yes, that's right. Pretend patients.
Now, you have a personal history of medicine based on your family history. Your father, Dr. James Newby Jr., was one of my own father's physicians, but again, he became the chief of medicine at the Norfolk Community Hospital. Was the first board-certified African-American internist to have privileges at Sentara Norfolk General, what's now Sentara Norfolk General. But your brothers are also in medicine. James Newby II, he's with the Newark Medical Center,
yes.
And your brother Keith, whom I do know, is a cardiologist, was the founder of the Fort Norfolk Medical Plaza.
Yes.
But there are other doctors in your family. Give us a little bit of background, please.
Well, you know, I always tell people, on my mother's side, they were farmers. On my father's side, they were educators, and they were somehow involved in the field of medicine. And so I actually have two great uncles on my father's side who were both general practitioners. They practiced in Pennsylvania and New York, and their sisters, one was a nurse, the other worked for the National Institute of Health as a chemist. Mm-hmm. I have lots of cousins who are either physicians or are nurses or pharmacists. And so that whole family is replete with those who went into medicine, and on the other side of that, both sides of my family, they went into education. I'm happy to say that I'm the only historian in the family, but it is still generally in the field of education.
Well, that makes for a great segue into our topic today. We're going to talk about the history of African Americans in medicine. Mm-hmm. And I was reflecting as I was working on this script how you and a good friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, Dr. Tommy Bozier, who was formerly the chief archivist of Norfolk State University, you guys played a significant role in my being commissioned by the city of Norfolk to write, produce, and direct a drama we call Cast in History on African Americans in Norfolk and the surrounding area. Mm. But in doing the research for that, I happened upon a man by the name of Sam Nixon, mm-hmm. whose story was really rather incredible. Could you tell us a little bit about Sam Nixon?
Sam Nixon was an enslaved man who was, he belonged to a man who was a physician, but he primarily did dental work. Mm-hmm. C.F. Martin, whose home and office was right there on Main Street, fairly close to the World Trade Center today. And apparently, and this was very typical, especially at that time period, if you owned a slave and you were a professional, then you trained your slave to apprentice in your field. And in the case of Dr. Martin, he trained Sam Nixon to be his apprentice, primarily in the dental work. And one of the things that he loved is he could send him out at night. And he would go around and do all these night calls for him. But Sam Nixon was very different in that he decided to use that to his advantage.
Absolutely.
And to help the community. And so he secretly became a conductor on the Underground Railroad and used his pass as a way of pretending that he was out on night calls when he was actually negotiating for people's freedom aboard ships that departed the Norfolk Harbor.
And a lot of the captains on these ships were amongst his patients, and that was how he was able mm-hmm. to arrange for the runaway slaves' mm-hmm. safe flight
and
to freedom.
Eventually word got out, this was about in 1854, right. that he was involved, and because, you know, Norfolk was a small town, it was only about 4 square miles. Portsmouth was even smaller, 2 square miles. And so it didn't take long before suspicions were raised because, you know, wherever he was located, slaves mysteriously disappeared. And so he got aboard a ship and left, and eventually went to New Bedford, Massachusetts, where he completed his dental training and became a dentist, and then actually supposedly entered into the war into the 54th Massachusetts
Oh, that
Regiment.
I didn't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, of course, I say supposedly
Okay,
because he
okay.
claims that. I haven't actually gone in and researched everything that he claimed, because when he escaped, some of the, especially one white abolitionist female, when she encountered him, she thought he, you know,
remember that.
exaggerated his life
remember
story.
that.
And then when he came back to Norfolk after the war.
But he
And
changed his name to Thomas Bain.
Thomas Bain,
Right.
which is what many people did. They adopted an alias because slavery was legal everywhere, even though Massachusetts did not recognize slavery. Legally, anyone could come in, and if you were supposed to be a runaway slave, they could claim you.
Right.
And you, though, could not testify on your own behalf in court. And that's why Massachusetts would pass these personal liberty laws that would allow blacks to testify in court. But you were still liable to be captured, and some of them were. And so they always adopted an alias so that it wouldn't, you know, bring suspicion on them. But after the war, he returned back to Norfolk, set up his practice as a dentist, and then entered politics.
Yeah, he was a delegate to the Virginia Constitutional
Yes,
Convention.
in 1867-68.
And there is a street in Norfolk named for him, Bain Avenue,
Yes.
that a lot of folks, they drive by it every day and have no idea of the history.
Yes.
And it's Bayne. Okay, I want to move on and talk about a couple of women. One is Rebecca Crumpler. Rebecca Lee Crumpler, the first African-American woman to graduate from an American medical school. And when we were talking, you mentioned Dr. Sarah Garland Boyd Jones, who was born in Albemarle, Virginia, and was the first woman to be licensed to practice medicine in the state. First black woman to be licensed to practice medicine in the state. Tell us about these two women, please.
Most people, when they think about the professions of women, they think nursing and they think education. When indeed, after the Civil War, and one of the two women was born before the Civil War, and one was born right after the Civil War. It's during that period that women are entering education, but by the 1870s, more and more entering the field of medicine. And that becomes the second most popular profession. Because nursing really wasn't a profession. It was becoming a profession, but it really wouldn't be a profession until the turn of the 20th century, as the nation established schools for nursing, and they professionalized that field. And so many of the women who were going in were actually able to go into schools, Howard University being the first one that had open admission. And what I mean by open admission is they admitted blacks and whites, men and women. Most medical schools were closed to blacks, and they were closed to women of any race. And so Howard Medical School, a lot of people don't know this, graduated whites as well as blacks, men as well as women. The one problem, though, that women had was in the field of anatomy, because of social convention and so forth. Right. You know, women could not practice or learn about anatomy sometimes in the same room as men. And so that became a barrier to some degree for a lot of women. And it was certainly a problem for Sarah Jones, because I looked, when she finished Howard Medical School in 1892, and she became, 1893, and then she was actually licensed to practice in 1895. She had a low score in anatomy, and all of her other scores were pretty high. And initially they didn't pass her, they didn't license her, and then they reversed the decision and decided to license her to practice medicine, because that's the one area that they knew women had a difficult time passing because of these restrictions.
Let's talk now about another woman who had a prominent role. She was, I hate to use this term, but for all intents and purposes, she was basically a victim, because researchers and scientists, without her permission, got cells from her, and there was something pretty spectacular about her cells. I'm talking about Henrietta Lacks. Such an incredible story, and I will ask you, Dr. Mercer, to talk a little bit about it by introducing what was called the HeLa Immortal Cell Line.
Yeah.
The key word there is immortal. Tell us about Henrietta Lacks.
Well, the HeLa, they used that because her name was Henrietta Lacks. And so the H-E and the L-A.
Right.
Her name was not originally Henrietta, but she changed her name to Henrietta, or we don't know exactly how it was changed. But she was born and raised for a little bit in Roanoke, Virginia, on a plantation which they say was her white great-grandfather's log cabin on the plantation. And this was in 1920, I think. The sad story is that she developed, after having 5 children, and the 5th child, during the pregnancy of the 5th child, she had a lump that she sought attention for, and it turned out to be adenocarcinoma of the cervix after that developed after she had had the 5th child. She was treated with radium treatments, but died when she was 31 from metastatic adenocarcinoma of the cervix. And the important thing about her cells were that they obtained, I'm sure it was biopsies, but they obtained samples of her cervical cells, some of the cancerous ones and some of the healthy ones, without her permission. A physician there, Dr. Howard Jones and Dr. Otter Gay, they kept the cells. The significant thing about those cells was they were able to be to stay alive and to be used, to be kept alive and to be used over and over and over again for various research techniques.
From what I understand, they manufactured some 20 tons of this woman's cells, and they led to over 11,000 patents.
Right. Now, they used those cells to, Jonas Salk used those cells to help develop the polio vaccine. They use the cells still today. They use them to understand how the body responds to cancer research and AIDS research and gene mapping.
Incredible.
The other sad thing was that the family did not know for 20 years almost that these cells were being used.
And they found out when folks came to them trying to get blood samples so that they could continue their work. I just got to cue that we don't have a whole lot of time left, and there's a lot more folks that I want to talk about. So Dr. Nubia Alexander, if you could tell us a bit about Patricia Bath, who was she and so forth.
Okay, so I'm going to have to...
Okay, Patricia Bath, she was the first woman ophthalmologist. She was appointed to the faculty of UCLA School of Medicine, Jules Stein Eye Institute, and the first woman to chair an ophthalmology residency program in the U.S., and the first African-American female doctor to receive a medical patent. So that was pretty incredible.
Well, you know, the one thing I wanted to say about all of these female physicians that were coming along starting in the latter part of the 19th century on into the 20th century is that most of them really wanted to focus their attention on healthcare issues having to do with women, because women's health was one of the last areas that men were interested in engaging in. And so many of these early women, but even those who were coming along in the 1920s and 30s, such as Dorothy Farabee, who was born here in Norfolk, who became the head of Women's Health Institute in Washington, D.C., associated with Howard Medical School, is that they wanted to make sure that health care was provided equally to women, and most especially to black women. Because just like with Henrietta Lacks, black women's bodies had historically been appropriated, in some cases violently, against their will, and used to help the general population without being the recipients of that particular health care, whether it's discoveries or inventions or whatever. And so even with Bath, it was important because she was part of that legacy of women who were going into healthcare. But she came along at a time when she could patent her own work, she could protect her own work and get credit for her work and be accepted by the medical field in what she did. And this was very unusual, and it actually started a newer trend.
Okay, let's move on to make sure we include as many of these folks as we can. Dr. Charles Drew, when I was living in D.C., there was no way you can live in D.C. back in the 70s particularly and not know of Dr. Charles Drew. In 30 seconds or less, I'll just say in the political commentary, tell us about Dr. Charles Drew, and either one of you can respond there.
Well, go ahead.
Dr. Drew was big in blood banking. He was the first to be to find that you could freeze the plasma, which is a portion of the blood could be frozen, and so he developed various techniques for preserving blood. He also served in the Red Cross, and he was it was the Red Cross then, but
he was a president or something of the blood bank of the American Red Cross.
Correct, and you're talking about the myth of his death.
Right.
It was said that he was in an automobile accident and he had sanguinated because he was in North Carolina, not able to.
Now you just used a word that
died from loss of blood.
Loss of blood. Okay. All right.
So it was ironic, loss of blood, because they would not transfuse him.
But you know what's also interesting, and this is something that Dr. Hoffler, who was the chief of medicine or chief of surgery, excuse me, at Norfolk Community Hospital, he told me that he was trained by Dr. Drew, and that Dr. Drew had a vision the same way that Charles Houston, who had been dean of the School of Law at Howard University, also had this vision of establishing throughout the country professionals in constitutional law and history, experts in that, to challenge segregation and discrimination laws. Charles Drew had a similar vision for medicine. His goal was to establish a cadre of black surgeons throughout the country so that they could begin providing that level and that specialty of health care to all African Americans throughout the country by first establishing residency programs in African American hospitals, because most white hospitals in the 1940s through some part of the 60s did not admit blacks to residency programs.
Okay, let's talk very quickly about one of my favorite movies of all time, Something the Lord Made, and we have to do this pretty quickly because I want to make sure we get some contact information. Something the Lord Made was about a gentleman by the name of Vivian Thomas, portrayed by Mos Def, and it was in a movie portrayed by Mos Def and Alan Rickman. Who was Dr. Vivian Thomas?
Well, Vivian Thomas, V-I-V-I-E-N, was a man that was born to a slave. His grandfather was a slave in Louisiana. He went to Vanderbilt. Went to Nashville, Tennessee, where he was introduced to a Dr. Alfred Blaylock, and from that point on until he stayed with Dr. Blaylock for years, became his surgical assistant. He was responsible for training many surgeons at Johns Hopkins University, but never became an MD. His highest level of education was high school, but they did in 1976 award him an honorary degree. So he developed two major operations. One was repairing the tetralogy of Fallot, which is another way of saying the blue baby syndrome.
Yes.
And in that defect, the heart has 4 different defects in 4 different chambers. And the second one was transposition of the great vessels, and he developed what they call the atrial septectomy.
Okay.
And
I actually am familiar with that.
Okay. And I think that Dr. Blaylock noted that the suture line was really invisible and not able to be seen when he had stitched the 2 vessels together, and so he said it looked like something the Lord had made, and that's how we got the title of the movie.
Incredible, only to have a high school degree, and he was teaching surgery. Before we do absolutely completely run out of time, if we can get some contact information. The Norfolk Community Health Center, which is kind of an offshoot of Norfolk Community Hospital.
That's right.
The Norfolk Community Health Center, how can folks reach your office?
We are at 1401 Tidewater Drive in Norfolk. The phone number is 757-623-0095. We offer primary care services. We also have a podiatrist, and we have a general surgeon that does endoscopies. We also offer HIV care, and we are doing a new program. We have a grant with the city to deliver HIV care for Ryan White patients, but we also are doing something new called PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis, where the patient comes, and if he is associated with a high-risk partner or has HIV, then we're giving them medication.
Okay. And Dr. Nubia Alexander, how can someone reach you?
I'm at Norfolk State University in the History and Interdisciplinary Studies Department. Also director of the Joseph Jenkins Roberts Center for the African Diaspora Studies. And so they can always contact me through the university. Office number is 823-2268, but it's always best to contact me via email. And you can always go on the Norfolk State website, type in my name, type in Nubie or Nubie Alexander, and you will see me there.
Ladies, I really wish we had more time, because there's one person in particular we didn't get to, but maybe we can do this again in the near future. This is the kid that invented a special surgical technique for 14 years old. Invented a special suturing technique for hysterectomies. Again, thank you so very much for joining us today to talk about this important topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And of course, we want to thank you for joining us today for this edition of Health Watch. Remember, you can always watch previous editions of Health Watch online at www.norfolk.gov/HealthWatch. If you'd like to drop me a line, you can email me at terrence.affer-anderson@vdh.virginia.gov. Of course, you can always call me at 757-683-8836. That's 757-683-8836. For the Norfolk Department of Public Health, I'm Terrence Affer-Anderson, and this has been Health Watch.